tell is, madam?
Yes, you. Abort as many babies as possible because the world's too populated.
It's not your body, it's not your choice. This is my fourth baby. It is alive. It's not just a clump of cells. This is my body, but inside it's my child's body.
Everyone has the right to choose.
What about the baby?
It's not a baby.
When does it become a baby in your eyes?
Should a young child be put in a position to have a baby because she's been
Rape is a tragedy. I condemn the rapist. I say castrate him. Having said that, we shouldn't punish the baby.
You have two victims. You have the woman that's been violated against her will, and then you have the baby become the second victim.
Notice how you say babies. Why is that a baby and not just a cell?
Because life starts at conception. Pro-choice and pro-lifers often talk past each other because pro-lifers will tend to say life begins at conception. Pro-choicers will say,
We'll have to say life begins at conception.
if you can convince them.
You asked me to take my religion out of... I can't.
They don't value the word of God as much as you do.
Two adults consent to have a baby.
What about rape?
That
Didn't consent.
That does not make any difference. That's the awkwardness. That's the awkward. I understand.
Abortion, you are doing the intentional killing. You're, in a way, setting your womb on fire.
I can break up with my boyfriend and say, oh, I don't want this baby anymore, and I can go and get it killed. But we won't cry over that one, because that's my choice. What about the choice of the baby? He can't say, I want to live, I want to live.
Pro-life 100%. It is the side of science. It's the side of common sense.
I'm not convinced. At what point do we bestow personhood upon a fetus? I feel like that's the big question.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive in. If you want to skip ahead and jump straight to our first conversation of the day, be my guest, you can head to this timestamp now. But if instead you would like a little bit more context, you'd first like to hear my position on abortion in depth. Spoiler alert, it's changed since our last pro-life, pro-choice episode. As well as second, hear my take on both the pro-life and the pro-choice movements more generally, then sit tight, strap in, and LFG. Firstly, my position. In our last pro-life, pro-choice episode, I just attended the 2nd of July pro-choice rally at Melbourne State Library following the overturning of Roe v. Wade in the US, and things got heated to say the least.
Where is your uterus, man?
How does it feel to have zero pussy in your entire life?
What would you say to a pro-lifer to convince them of your position?
Fuck these cunts! Fuck these cunts!
At the time, I was neither a hardcore pro-choicer nor pro-lifer, in the sense that I was somewhere in between. Supportive of first trimester abortions, not convinced that life started at conception, but also not convinced that women should have unrestrained access to abortions right up until birth. And that's one of the reasons why people at the last rally took issue with what I was doing. I was daring to ask for specifics. Tell me, when exactly does the fetus have a right to life? Now, my position since then has changed, and just quickly, this is what I am all about, right? I want to exemplify the process where I can update my beliefs in real time, publicly, in front of you all. I want to give myself permission to try and fail, to be wrong, as I actively try to figure out what is true and what is good. Because fundamentally, to say what you believe is to risk being wrong. It's not a crime to be wrong if you're genuinely doing your best to make sense of things. The real crime here is believing that you are beyond being wrong altogether. In a word, arrogance. I don't need to have the right answer from the jump, and neither do you. That's important to know and remember. We just need the courage to exercise humility, to admit our own ignorance, painful as it may be. The courage to be curious, the courage to engage in dialogue, because real dialogue is risky. To genuinely listen to someone is to risk being changed. You have to risk leaving the conversation different to how you entered it. You have to be ready and willing to sacrifice who you are for who you could be. Willing to let go of your ego, those beliefs and ideas that you hold on to and identify with. You have to be willing to let them die. One more thing before I explain my new position on abortion, here is a quick distinction that's worth making clear. What I want and what is right are not the same thing. For example, if I were to accidentally get a girl pregnant, would I want the ability to terminate/abort the fetus/baby out of convenience? Maybe, but does that mean it's the moral thing to do? Not necessarily. What is good? What is moral? What is right? What is wrong? These are different questions to what do I want. And now then, onwards to my position on abortion. In short, I am now pro-life with 2, maybe 3 exceptions. 1, the mother's life is at a significantly heightened risk due to medical complications. 2, when the child has a severe mental or physical disability. And 3, maybe if the woman has been raped. Honestly, this last one is quite a shock even to me. I'm not absolutely set on it. I'm still trying to figure out where I stand, but let me walk you through my thinking, and it goes without saying. Tell me where you disagree. I want to hear your thoughts. Now, a hypothetical for you. If my daughter were, God forbid, to be raped, Would I want her to have access to an abortion? My instant reaction is absolutely. But is it the right and moral thing to do? I'm not so sure. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because maybe I should have been more protective of my daughter in the first place. Maybe I shouldn't have let her get into a situation where she was vulnerable to being violated by a sexual predator. And you could apply the same thinking to a grown woman, as harsh as this may sound. If you've been raped, why? How did you get yourself into that situation in the first place? How did we as a collective allow for the possibility of such an atrocity to come to fruition? And I hope you can sense that this comes from a place of care for women. It comes from a place of we should protect our women. There are sexual psychopaths out there and we should be on the lookout for them. What I'm saying is not condoning their behavior or victim blaming. I'm just stating an uncomfortable truth. As much as I'd like to just click my fingers and be rid of all sexually predatory psychopaths, their actuality is something that must be taken into account. Moving on, I think another uncomfortable truth is that we place more value on some lives compared to others based on their ability to solve problems and contribute to society at large. Now, I know this might seem like a slippery slope, but hear me out. Again, I use hypotheticals to see where my reason takes me, and I hopefully have the courage to be honest in my thinking, even if I'm afraid of or uncomfortable with the conclusions I come to. And this is one of those instances. So, hypothetical 1, and you'll see me paint this out for a pregnant lady later in this video. There are 2 fetuses in the womb. One is me, one is Elon Musk. Only one can survive. Which do you pick? I think it's perfectly reasonable to pick Elon, given the incredible value he's provided to the world. And if you don't agree with that last part, just swap out Elon for your idol. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, Jordan Peterson, whoever it is for you, given the immense value they've provided, I think it would be reasonable to pick them over me or even you. So even though we might say all lives are equally valuable, when push comes to shove, we don't actually believe that, and our actions seem to belie our words. The exact same logic can be applied to hypothetical number 2, which again I paint for this pregnant lady in the video. 2 fetuses, one has Down syndrome and is going to be mentally disabled, the other not so. Only one can survive. Which do you pick? I think a large majority, if forced to make a decision, would pick to abort the Down syndrome fetus. And not to belabor the point here, but this is another instance where hypotheticals are crucial to figuring out what we actually believe. Because I gave this situation to a girl I went on a date with who said she was pro-choice and believed that all life was equally valuable. But when push came to shove, she too also chose to abort the Down syndrome fetus as opposed to leaving it up to chance. And this is where what we believe isn't necessarily just what we speak or the words that we mouth. It's rather, what do we do? Our actions are where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So perhaps a more accurate description of what we tend to believe collectively is that all life is valuable, but some lives are more valuable than others based on ... Based on what exactly? I think it's something to do with consciousness and the ability to compute information, make sense of the world, and solve problems. Another way of putting this, perhaps more mythologically, for those of you who are familiar with Jordan Peterson's work, we value the logos, the spirit that confronts archetypal chaos and makes out of it archetypal order. We value the role of the mythological hero, the Son of God incarnate. So to summarize, I'm pro-life with the exception of 1, abortions to save the mother's life, 2, abortions of physically or mentally disabled fetuses, and 3, maybe if the mother has been raped. I'm not sure about that last one. Now that you know my position, let's move on to my analysis of the pro-life and pro-choice movements more generally and the dynamic between the two. The footage for today's episode is a combination of 1, a pro-life rally that took place in Sydney called the March for Life, 2, a pro-life rally that took place in Melbourne called the March for the Babies, and 3, an accompanying counter-protest in Melbourne that was pro-choice. Now, unfortunately, the pro-choice movement in this episode, as you'll see, does a really bad job, at least in my opinion, of presenting the pro-choice argument well. Amongst those who attend, there is a palpable sense of resentment, bitterness, entitlement, lack of responsibility, lack of modesty, lack of civility, lack of thorough thought and critical thinking. And I'd even go so far as to say there's an unsettling sense of authoritarianism, an implicit and unspoken, agree with me or shut up and sit down. And this somewhat relates to a tweet I made recently that I'd like to quickly share with you. Compassion-driven activism and resentment-driven activism cloaked in compassion branding are 2 very different things and ought to be treated as such. Now, I'm sure some of the pro-choices at the counter rally have the best of intentions at heart, but the whole lot of them, I'm not so sure about it. Is it really compassion that's driving them, or is this abortion issue just another socially acceptable vehicle for the manifestation of their unaddressed underlying resentment? And you can see what I'm talking about with the lack of willingness unwillingness to engage in respectful dialogue, and worse, the persistent name-calling and just blatant rudeness. The organizer telling me to f*** off, full-grown ladies calling me an incel.
Do you even know what an incel is, madam?
Yes, you.
And Liam, the guy holding the camera, a virgin, and people at the protest just generally labeling us as far right.
Most people know you're the far right.
We run a YouTube channel.
You're from the right. We're not talking to you.
You're welcome to look at our YouTube channel. It's okay. There's no pressure.
Simply because we are either asking questions or disagree with them. And all of this, honestly, it is horrible conflict resolution. If you disagree with someone and you want to resolve the conflict, you want to convince them that maybe they're missing something that you know, name calling and shutting down dialogue is the surest way to make zero progress and breed nothing but disdain. People don't like being screamed at like they're stupid. Instead, pro-choicers who attend these rallies could make the best argument for why a woman should have access to safe and legal abortions, and there are good arguments to be made. Articulate yourselves as best as possible without the screaming, without reciting some low-resolution mantra you found on the internet, and open people's eyes to why maybe they should believe what you believe, and in doing so, make some progress toward your cause instead of turning away all of the potential listeners with tantrum-like screeches. A good pro-choice argument can be made, but this is not it. The behavior you're going to see in today's episode is not it. Personally, I think Coleman Hughes has the best pro-choice argument I've come across, so I'll pop a link in the description for you to read his breakdown in more depth if you're interested. And pro-choicers attending the next rally, take notes. I want to engage in dialogue. I actually want you to present your best foot forward. I want something of substance to contend with. Part of me wants to be convinced by you, but the moment you start screaming at me or calling me a fascist for simply asking you why you believe what you believe,
Bye-bye, fash. What makes us a fascist?
you lose me and a lot of other reasonable people too. The pro-life contingency, on the other hand, seems to be much more open to conversation. They're more respectful, they honor disagreement and engage in dialogue without degenerating into venomous character attacks. And honestly, that's already a win for the pro-lifers, regardless of the claims they make with regard to abortion. They get brownie points straight out of the gates by way of simply being civil. But having said that, here's where I think the pro-lifers and the pro-choicers fall short with regard to their respective arguments regarding abortion. The pro-choicers take as self-evident a woman's bodily autonomy with little to no regard for the possibility of a second body needing to be considered, slipping in the premise that the fetus does not have a right to life. Or at least they're not clear about where this right to life begins, and when you ask, trust me, they're not always ready to think about it or draw a clear line in the sand. The my body, my choice mantra is over simplistic, and it talks past the crux of the disagreement with the pro-lifers. Where does the fetus have a right to life? Meanwhile, the pro-lifers who appeal to religious authority instantly lose the credibility of their potential pro-choice listeners. The argument, because God said so, does not work for atheists. You have to let it go. Again, all of it comes down to at what point ought we bestow the fetus with personhood or a legal right to life. It's not self-evident that it should be at the moment of conception, but it's also not self-evident that it should be as the fetus pops out of the womb. For me, when I think about the pro-lifer versus pro-choicer dynamic, it brings to mind the image of two bickering partners, say husband and wife, both with reasonable issues to raise and solid arguments to put forth, but also both talking past one another without properly listening, without really trying to understand the other and come together via dialogue. If you consider yourself a pro-choicer, I encourage you to articulate as clearly as possible why you believe what you believe without repeating any of the all too common cliche slogans like my body, my choice or no uterus, no opinion. Don't push reasonable people, people who are reason able, people who are capable of being reasoned with and potentially understanding your position. Don't push them away with name calling or outright condemnation. You do nothing but hurt your cause. And conversely, if you consider yourself a pro-lifer, I encourage you to do the same thing. Articulate as clearly as possible why you believe what you believe without appealing to religious authority. No, this is how God intended it. No, it's written in the Bible. See if you can make your case in such a way that it resonates with an atheist. Maybe then, the two factions can come together and engage in productive dialogue to make sense of not just what we want, but rather what is the moral way forward. With all that said, I hope that gives you a decent picture of what's going on and how I'm thinking about the issue currently. I'd love to hear where you sit. Would you consider yourself pro-life, pro-choice, or somewhere in between, and why exactly? Go ahead also and point out to me in the comments where you agree or disagree with me or the various people in today's episode. Let's get a discussion going. Onwards then, I have popped timestamps on the video for each convo, as well as what the general position is of the person person I'm speaking with, be it pro-life or pro-choice. So if you're pro-choice, go look at the pro-life ones. If you're pro-life, then go look at the pro-choice ones. And now for our first conversation of the episode, enjoy.
This lady's sign says, I love abortion.
Pay for your own abortions! Why do you want free abortions?
Anyone want to have a chat? Tell us why you're pro-choice. Anyone feels like it? You guys are them, okay. What makes us a fascist? What makes us a fascist? Is it just because we ask you questions? Anyone want to tell us why you're pro-choice? Anyone?
Okay.
Yep.
I am pro-choice because women have a right to their bodies, right? They shouldn't have to raise a child if they just want to have sex, you know? I personally think you should interview a woman about this because they will have a more detailed opinion than me. So I think you better ask them.
Anyone want to share why they're pro-choice?
Mate, it's a protest, not a fucking debate.
Anyone want to share why you're pro-choice? No, that's all right.
Because I'm a f***ing med student.
You what?
Because I'm a med student.
I was too. Yeah. What would you say to a pro-lifer, right? If you want to try to convince them. If you want to try to convince them of why they should be a pro-choice.
I don't think I need to convince them.
What?
I don't think I need to convince the pro-lifers because I don't think they use logic and they're not for women.
And real quick, guys, this is exactly what I mean when I say there was a palpable sense of entitlement as well as arrogance. So one, I'm entitled to making change and implementing my worldview without convincing those I disagree with. And two, I'm arrogant enough to think that I'm absolutely correct, so much so that I'm beyond listening to and engaging with my opposition because they're fundamentally dumb or bad people and I'm fundamentally smart, caring, and virtuous.
But isn't that why, like,
John Mustic?
wouldn't you, if there's pro-lifers here later today, wouldn't you want to convince them?
No, we can't convince them.
Don't you love
how do you get them
traditional
to...
old school Australian lollies?
Gents, would you be interested in sharing why you're pro-choice? No? Why so hostile, bro? Are you guys
Do you want a dummy? Rainbow coloured dummy?
I'm alright, thank you.
You sure
Yeah.
you cook so you're going to
No, I appreciate it, though. Thanks. What are you guys here for? Are you here for the pro-life or pro-choice?
Don't talk
No,
to themselves. They misuse your stuff on the internet.
And just for the record, guys, this lady who said don't speak to the incels because they misuse whatever you say online, we actually spoke to her for the first pro-life, pro-choice episode. We used the entire conversation with her from front to back, and she actually does a pretty solid job. I think the reason why she's saying this, she might be a little bit sour at the fact that we clearly don't 110% agree with her on everything. And two, she may have seen that episode and may not feel so good about how she performed in the interview. But like I said, I think she actually did a pretty reasonable job. So anyway, we might pop a link here somewhere for you to go and watch that if you are interested, but we definitely did not misuse the interview that we did with her. Onwards.
It's not actually the job of people to educate you on why pro-choice is the right thing. You should go and do some research and then come to this conversation with something behind
Yeah,
you.
no,
At the moment it's quite vapid, I guess.
These guys are not talking to you in good faith.
I'm good. Are you right?
Just have a nibble.
No thanks, mate.
You know you want to.
I don't want my teeth to end up like yours.
Do you want one?
You guys want to explain why you're pro-choice? What you would say to a pro-lifer?
I'd say have a mustic.
Dude, don't put the mustic in my mouth. You can offer it. You can offer it to me.
Do you want to have it?
You can offer it to me, but I'm going to politely refuse. Thanks.
It's a bit like you continually going around asking people if they've got any comments to say.
Well, it's not to the same person. So the analogy would be you offering me a mustic once, me saying no thank you, and then you leaving me alone.
Would you like a mustic?
And then you leaving me alone. Do you see how that's different?
This is at our rally. So.
Do you see how it's different though? Right, your analogy is flawed. No thank you. No thanks. Madam, sorry to interrupt. I saw that you did a speech before. We're going to be interviewing some of the pro-lifers later today. We'd love to have a chat to a pro-choicer. You're welcome to look at our YouTube channel. It's okay. There's no pressure. You're welcome to look at our videos about plastic. No problems. Some people do. Some people do. Some people are open to conversation.
Once people know you're the far right, they want to talk.
Out of curiosity, why do you think that we're far right?
Because you don't eat mustics.
We cry over the miscarriages, we cry over the baby that's killed accidentally in the womb, we cry over those unborn babies, but all these other babies can be killed at full term. A fully termed baby, perfect in their mother's womb. I can break it with my boyfriend and say, I don't want this baby anymore, and I can go and get it killed in the womb. And she's a fully fledged baby, a fully formed baby. But we won't cry over that one, because that's my choice. What about the choice of the baby? The baby can't give anybody, he can't say, I want to live, I want to live. It's a baby. You know, they keep their heads inside the woman's body and rip them apart. Daniel Andrews won't even allow them to be anaesthetised before they're ripped apart in their mother's womb.
What are your thoughts on...
So we speak for the babies who have no voice, right?
Yeah, if a woman were to have were to want an abortion, what are your thoughts on? Let's say that there's going to be a compromise between the pro-lifers and the pro-choicers. If there was going to be a compromise and there was certain abortions that were allowed, what are your thoughts on making it mandatory for a woman seeking an abortion to have to watch a graphic video of an abortion taking place before she then went ahead with the abortion? Because it's kind of forces you to be fully accountable for...
It could be helpful, because I think people don't know what they do to them. They don't know that they rip them apart.
Yeah.
Rip them apart.
And I think the vegans make the same claim, right? Of like, you eat meat but you don't know what's going on. You should know exactly what's going on. They try to open people's eyes. I also think you could make a similar case for abortion, where if you're going to engage in an abortion,
understand what's going to happen to your little baby in your womb. But see, they depersonalise it. Like in many things these days, they change the terms, they change the words. Oh, it's now a product. It's not a human.
It's a parasite.
Oh, well,
that's
do you know, the last time I was on one of these, I saw a big sign, a really, really big sign, and we're people of love. We're filled with God's love here. We're crying out for these little babies who have no voice. And do you know what I saw on that big sign? It said, the only good baby is a dead baby. Now, that's the sort of people up in that other group who are speaking, right?
We saw
no love there.
Yeah, we saw a sign that said, I love abortions. And to me, that's a bit of a red flag.
It's very much a red flag. However, my challenge to a person who is for abortion is, if you do not believe that this is a child from the beginning, a human baby, when does it become a human child?
Currently, I do agree that the fetus or the zygote, the single-celled egg sperm join, it's human DNA. It is alive, but is it a life or is it a person?
It is a life.
I'm not sure. So hold on. What I can definitely say I'm against is reckless casual sex without any accountability.
Exactly.
And then mulling over, I might be pregnant, I might not be. Let me see how things go. Let me see how I feel, and then deciding, okay, I'm gonna kill the baby. I'm not for that. But also, I have a lot of trouble thinking about if someone has safe sex, they wear a condom, maybe they're on some kind of other contraceptive, and one slips past the goalpost. Are we going to force that person to have the baby?
I suppose the thing is that every baby is a gift from God. Right? Every life is a gift from God, and when you believe that, even if these unfortunate things happen, once upon a time, people who were childless could get a baby. They could get a baby because they were unable to have their own. These days, no, we're just going to kill them. Don't even think you might give a gift to somebody else of another little life that you don't want it, but someone else would,
Life is not a blackboard that we can rub out our mistakes, right? Once we've done something, the act of casual sex that has produced a human conception is not should not be wiped out, because what happens is that baby, that child, that whatever you want to call it, that is a human being.
Okay, so just quickly, are you for or against abortions in the instance of rape?
I'm not for abortion.
Ever? What about...
Because you have two victims. You have the woman that's been violated against her will, and then you have the baby become the second victim.
Pro-life 100%, because it is the side of science, it's the side of common sense, and that's not even me.
I'm not convinced. Okay. Let's pretend that you were speaking to one of the pro-choicers who are at the counter rally, and you were trying to convince them of why they should be pro-life as well. What would you say to them? So I don't think common sense is going to work.
Yeah, it's kind of not really the best thing to say off the bat.
Just quickly here, I think all of us know this. When we disagree with someone and we say, my answer is obviously correct because of common sense, it can be very belittling. It doesn't work as a way of resolving conflict. I wouldn't classify it as dialogue. And so this guy comes around pretty quickly and realizes, okay, well, that's not the best way to go about it. And then he goes on to try and articulate what he believes.
If you think that a life begins at conception, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to give the little zygote, the combination of the egg and the sperm, a right to life. So personhood, legally speaking. Why do you think that personhood should begin at conception as opposed to maybe 6 weeks when there's a heartbeat or end of first trimester or whatnot?
So the term human rights should be inclusive of all human beings. So I know people...
Yeah, but I know that some would say that isn't a human being. A sperm and an egg touching in a petri dish isn't a human being. So why would you consider it a human being, and what would you say to someone who doesn't consider it a human being?
So human is a biological term. We agree that sperm has human DNA. Well, that belongs to someone else, and we agree that an egg is also part of a woman's body in that sense that it contains human DNA of the mother. So when the two human DNA of the father and the mother come together, that is a new human life. But it comes down to personhood. So personhood is a philosophical term.
Yes. Okay, and this is where I think sometimes the pro-choicers and pro-lifers speak past each other.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's not you said it was a scientific thing at the beginning, and I don't think it is. I think we can agree that the fetus is alive. Maybe that's a scientific claim. But the claim that it is a person deserving of human rights, that's a conceptual claim. An analogy is, can you say where adulthood begins? Right? It's a conceptual problem. It's not a science. It can be informed by science, but it's not necessarily it's not a scientific question. It's a philosophical question. And I think you can graph that onto personhood. Just because you might say that life begins at conception doesn't necessarily mean that we ought to bestow the fetus with a right to life at conception as well.
It takes three people to make a baby. It's a male, a female, and God giving the life, right?
But if you believe that life begins at conception, then why would you be pro-abortion in the case of rape? Because is that not still killing?
I'm not really pro-abortion. I'm tolerant of abortion for those circumstances. I'm not pro.
Would you still view it as murder?
I wouldn't view it as murder. Am I happy with it? No, and it's something I'm conflicted about. I still believe life begins at that very first stage, but there are cases, as you mentioned, disease which can't be cured, other considerations like rape and those sorts of things which would come into it, in my opinion.
So a girl who's been raped and who falls pregnant, would you be not supportive of her having access to abortion?
Well, we're not even.
And I'm not going to make you out to be a horrible person. I'm genuinely curious because I'm still not decided on that one.
Yeah. So there's so many options. You can have the night after pill.
After pill,
there are
it's
options.
only 85% effective.
Yeah.
So let's say that she was raped and then she had the 85%. Yeah. And it slips through.
Yes.
And she falls
Okay
pregnant.
then.
I guess there's a quantum leap between saying that's okay at 6 or 8 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks, that's okay, and then the other end of the scale they're saying we have the right to abort a baby all the way up to 9 months or part birth.
Very different, which is why
they're two ends of the spectrum.
Absolutely, which is why I want to see where people sit, because it's not a binary, right? There's a spectrum of positions, and there's a lot of nuance.
Yeah.
First of all, rape is a tragedy. I condemn the rapist. I say castrate him, chemically castrate him. However, we should avoid...
I say chop his off.
Even better.
Yeah.
Just give it to the butcher.
Or
and
kill him.
I'll just throw in the wood chipper. Let nature do the rest.
Yeah. So, sorry, keep going.
Okay, so first of all, I want to make it clear. I condemn rapists, okay? Yep. Anybody who abuses a girl or a kid throw them in the wood chipper.
Common ground?
Yes.
Yep.
Having said that, we shouldn't punish the baby because the baby has no involvement whatsoever.
But notice how you say baby. So what makes you think that, let's say the rape has just occurred, the egg and the sperm have met. Why is that a baby and not just a cell?
Oh, because life starts at conception, because that's when a unique form of DNA has started.
But why do you think that deserves a right to life at conception?
Because
I know that pro-choicers don't believe that.
Oh,
right.
Because like I said, back to what I was saying, I believe that life starts with a unique set of DNA. That's when life begins, okay?
Unique set of DNA. Okay. Does that also apply for when it's not in the womb? So if there's a unique set of DNA, like a stem cell, like say in IVF, in an IVF clinic, are all of those zygotes, the combination, are they also babies getting murdered?
Hard to say, to be honest, but I love that you asked this question. Will those zygotes, or whatever you want to say, will they develop into a baby?
Right, okay, so I think this is maybe a key.
Love you, have a nice day. Yeah, you were saying?
I'm curious as to, in an instance like that, I wonder whether there's a distinction to be made between a zygote that has been implanted within the uterus that now, if there's no significant intervention, it will develop into a fully conscious human life, versus a zygote that is in a petri dish that, if nothing happens, it's not going to. It doesn't have the potential yet. Right. Potential. I'm just going to put an asterisk next to that to develop into a fully conscious human being. At the
Pro-life, pro-woman. Yeah, absolutely.
And tell me, because I know that some of the pro-choicers would say, well, that's anti-pro-woman.
Yeah,
right? Or it's anti-woman. It's not supportive of a woman's choice to have access to an abortion.
And then I would say to that, well, I'm a woman, and if I'm growing a baby, which I am, this is my 4th baby in here, we're very blessed.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. But again, this is my body, but inside it's my child's body.
At the moment of conception,
Yes.
I can say, yes, it's alive.
Yes.
Yes, it's human.
Yes.
Unique set of human DNA. But why do we bestow personhood, like a legal right to life, on that thing,
yes,
as opposed to, say, at 6 weeks or 12 weeks or later down the track? Why do you think we have to do it at conception as opposed to somewhere else?
For myself, as soon as I got my sonogram or my ultrasound, you can see your baby is moving and it has a heartbeat. So that to me shows that it is alive. It's a clump of, not just a clump of cells, it's formed as a person.
Yep.
And yeah, I just think it's definitely
so what
life and precious.
if it wasn't moving yet, like let's say it was just a week into the pregnancy, would you still view it as a person with
Yes,
a right to
I
life?
would.
Even
Yes.
if it's just a clump of cells at that point, still kind of?
Yes, because even if I went to the nursery and got a seed, let's say an apple tree, it's going to grow into a tree. This
is it a tree
stage
yet?
of development.
Is it a tree yet? Say, for example, if you had a sonogram,
yes,
and I'm not sure whether it's a sonogram or another scan,
scan,
and you found out that your baby had a severe mental or physical disability, do you think it's appropriate then to give a woman a choice to abort?
No, because again, it's not your body, it's not your choice. I believe this is a valuable life, and I don't believe in a perfect race or a perfect society. I think that's what we're told to believe, everything should be perfect and wonderful, but we all are told to love ourselves and love the skin you're in. I think we should all just help one another, support one another, and whether you have a disability, we can still contribute to society in a great way. It might not be the same way as you or me, but it's a different way.
Yeah, let me push back a little bit on that. If my wife and I she were to become pregnant, and we were to find out that it had, say, Down syndrome, I would want the choice to abort the fetus or the baby. And I think part of it is that whether people are willing to admit it or not, I think we implicitly place more value on the
Can I ask why you'd like to, your child, your DNA, and this is the woman that you love, why would you contemplate aborting your child because of an extra chromosome with Down syndrome or T21?
Yeah, I would say, I think, you're going to have to be kind here because I'm still trying to figure this out, but I think part of it is if I have a limited amount of resources to provide for my wife and my kids, I would prefer that go to a fully functioning, healthy, mentally, physically, etc. baby as opposed to one that has a severe mental or physical disability.
Okay.
And I think also part of the argument is like, I was thinking if I was in the womb as a fetus and Elon Musk were in the same womb, I think it would be completely appropriate to pick, and you could only pick one, I think it would be appropriate to pick Elon Musk because he does greater good for society at large. And I know that that's controversial, but I think the same argument can be applied for a mentally healthy baby and a baby who has a severe mental disability within the womb.
I would disagree. I think every life is valuable and sacred, and I think we've all got a part to play in society, and we're all unique. And I don't know. I just
One last question for you then,
yeah.
and this is very personal, but let's say that you had 2 babies in your womb.
I did. 1, 2.
Little twinnies?
Twins, yeah.
Let's say that you found out that one of them had Down syndrome.
Yes.
I'm not sure even whether that's possible, but hypothetical. And let's say that there was a situation where only one could be saved. Which would you say?
I would choose to continue my pregnancy. I'm Christian, so I would trust in God, and I could never reduce my pregnancy or terminate. How do you terminate a baby off your conscience? I could never live with myself.
Let's say that if you don't do anything, both are going to die, and if you do something, one's going to survive, but you have to pick which one. Which would you pick?
I personally wouldn't choose because I couldn't choose.
Dice? You say to the doctors, you guys figure it. You just.
I actually know. I know of cases, and I've read many books about things. Melinda Tankard-Reese is amazing to follow. She's written many wonderful books and talks about women's testimonies who were told to abort their children. You know, they're going to have dwarfism, they're going to have Down syndrome. The doctors got it wrong. The doctors have actually got it wrong and said it's a miracle.
Assuming I know that
that they're alive and well.
Assuming, I guess. Why I'm kind of painting this picture is I think most people would say, even if they say they value all life equally, I think in an instance like that, they would still say, if I had to pick,
yes,
I would pick the one without Down syndrome.
No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
I actually know personally, I'm a teacher, and I think it's really beautiful to see each child flourish. And I don't think whether, my husband and I, we've got our cognition and we're mentally sound, we've both got degrees. I don't think we're smarter than one another. I think we're smart in different ways. And I think, again, we contribute.
Would you say that a Down syndrome person is as smart as we are?
I think they contribute differently to society, but I think they're beautiful.
I agree. Okay,
they bring so much joy and love, and they're wonderful.
One thing I'd leave you to ponder on that thing is, you want to apply certain arguments to say choosing between 2 fetuses, particularly also with limited resources as well. Why were you limiting these discussions to people in utero? If you want to take your basic philosophy as utilitarianism, you can take that and apply that to other questions in society, but also see where your conclusions lead you. For instance, you talked about you and your wife having limited resources and therefore not wanting to spend them on a Down syndrome child, right? Why can't we then take, if you extrapolate that logic and take it forward to broader things? We have limited resources as a society. We have a budget deficit. Do you know what I mean?
So why not kill all the Down syndrome? Apply that same thinking to people who are currently aware.
Yeah.
I get that. Okay, so I wonder whether part of it is making that decision earlier before the fetus has developed conscious experience and perhaps, I don't know whether earned is the right word, personhood. If I was with my wife here, she was pregnant, it's a Down syndrome fetus, and we say we would like to abort so that we can have a child. We're only going to have resources for one child, and we would like for it to be a healthy, fully capable mental, physical child. Would you be against us aborting that Down syndrome fetus?
Yes.
And why?
And the reason being because I think all human beings have inherent value. And you talked about personhood. And personhood, I think, is a very important thing. See, taking personhood away from people has basically been used to justify a whole bunch of atrocities from slavery to the Holocaust, right? It's like if you want a thing, and I remember we had someone come and speak to us, they go, why are you tattooing numbers on us? Because we're denying you humanity. Likewise, why do you keep slaves? Like, well, they're not really people. And so my view is, from a purely secular perspective, the offspring of 2 humans can't be anything but human. Once you start applying personhood to people, right, then I can designate entire groups of people. We can start with the unborn. But then, by that same logic, who am I to argue with someone who says, well, I deny personhood to you?
Great point. Okay, so what about a brain-dead person who, I know this, I'm coming up with weird scenarios here, but I'm trying to see where my logic takes me. So if we have a brain-dead person who, it's a human life, but do we bestow that, I guess I said person, but do we bestow that life with personhood? My sense is that we don't, right? Because we remove people from life support, even though they might be a human and alive. We might say that they're alive.
Yep.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out, in an instance like that, is there something special about conscious experience? Yeah.
I ascribe the inherent just to be humanity itself, right? And I believe in life from conception to natural death. So when we take life support away, if we were putting life support on, we're artificially prolonging life. So I'm not a vitalist in the sense that keep everyone alive at all costs for as long as possible. As my old economics lecturer said, if that was truly the case, we'd all spend 100% of our budget on healthcare, and we don't.
We'd also drive at 1 kilometre an hour.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there are certain trade-offs that we have in that
Yes.
respect. Okay. If I were to give you the same situation that I gave your wife, she were to have some kind of a medical emergency where there's two fetuses, one is Down syndrome, one is not. Only doing nothing, both will die. Choosing one, one's going to survive. Would you choose one or the other?
No, I wouldn't. And we're on the same page, right? Because we take the same view. When we went in to see our obstetrician, we're like, no tests, no terminations. Each life is life. It was given to us even for a short time, and we lost one child earlier through a miscarriage, and we still love that child and think of it as our own. But it was unfortunate. But that's how things roll sometimes.
What are you guys, pro-life or pro-choice? Definitely pro-choice. Any of you pro-life? Do you even know what an incel is, madam? How would you define it? Have a good day, guys. Take care of yourselves. Bye. Yeah. I actually think that these pro-choices that we see today are doing a disservice to pro-choices. Right? In the same way that I think some climate activists do a really shit job of advocating for the climate. Ladies, pro-life or pro-choice?
Pro-choice.
Pro-choice? Why? What would you say to a pro-lifer? Because there's a bunch of pro-lifers up here.
Nah.
If you were genuinely trying to convince them.
You're going to bring a life into the world where it's probably not wanted in certain circumstances.
So just to play devil's advocate here, they would say, it doesn't matter whether you want the baby or not, the fact is that it's a human life and it has a right to life. What would you say to that?
I just say that they're delusional. I don't know. I don't know how to say it in a nice way.
Would you ever draw the line somewhere? Would you be supportive of abortions up until a certain point?
Yes. So say if you're long term, 25 plus weeks, and you want an abortion for the fact of you just don't want to have a kid. No. You made that decision up until now. You have the baby, adoption. You know.
Okay.
There's
so you draw the line at 25 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Would you guys draw the line anywhere else?
Just imagine a 12-year-old being pregnant.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, children having babies.
Yeah, I know. You can add on so many variables that make it infinitely complex.
Yeah.
But let's just say it was I don't know, someone our age, I'm 28, girl my age who gets pregnant, and then at what stage are we saying, you can have an abortion versus no, you should have had it sooner?
But also, it depends as well. Say you're 25 weeks and you found out that it has a problem, something that you're not going to be able to afford treatment or this and that.
Or I think this is the one of the rare instances where I'm very pro-choice. If I found out my kid had Down syndrome, I'd want to abort.
Yeah, see, I would be the same because.
But I'm not convinced with all the other ones. Yeah. I'm not convinced yet.
What other ones?
Well, all the other abortions. Yeah, the boys. Big sesh. Oh, yeah. Hey, gents. Hey, are you pro-life or pro-choice? Are you supportive of abortions or anti-abortion?
I reckon it's a chick's choice, to be honest.
Yeah, and right up until it pops out of the womb or before?
No. If it develops a bit more, I reckon.
Yeah, where? Is it heartbeat or?
Got no idea.
Not sure. Gents, what about you boys?
As long as I don't have a kid.
What's that?
As long as I don't have a kid sometimes.
Stay safe, boys. Wear protection. Pro-life. Madam, would you be willing to share your perspective really quick? Why are you pro-life?
You need to abort as many babies as possible because the world's too populated.
Wait, you're pro-choice then?
Yes.
What? Wow.
Wow. Everyone has the right to choose. Why shouldn't they?
What about the baby?
It's not a baby.
When does it become a baby in your eyes?
Should a young child be put in a position to have a baby because she's been
Okay, well, let's. I know that's a good hypothetical to unpack. Let's say we're not dealing with those extra variables. We've got a woman who's had unsafe, unprotected sex, falls pregnant, decides she doesn't want the fetus or baby. At what point would you say, draw the line, you can't have an abortion?
I'd say it's not my decision, it's hers.
Okay, so you'd say right up until it comes out of the womb?
No.
Okay, when?
Well, this.
What's the current law? 28 weeks, something like that?
Yeah, I think it's 24, I think, in Victoria.
That sounds about right.
Three months.
Why? So what's special about 24 weeks?
I'm guessing it's been determined by a range of experts to figure out what the point is.
I'm not sure you would have convinced the pro-lifers, but I appreciate you taking the time.
Nothing's going to convince the pro-lifers.
I disagree.
Nothing will convince pro-choicers.
I think there are some good pro-choice arguments, and I think that if they're put forth to pro-lifers, maybe they can have a little more empathy for the pro-choice position, and vice versa. It's a bit loud. Have a lovely day. Thanks for sharing. Take care. You guys pro-life or pro-choice? Pro-choice. What would you say? There's a pro-life march going on today. What would you say to a pro-lifer to try and kind of open their eyes to your position?
We were just at the counter rally.
Oh yeah. Yeah. What would you say to those pro-lifers?
I don't think that they would engage in a proper discussion about it.
If they did?
If they did.
And if they weren't like hyper-religious?
A lot of hypotheticals there, mate.
Well, I know that there are some people who are like that, right? Like I spoke to a gentleman earlier today who wasn't religious, who seemed open to reasoning.
I think people react mostly on the basis of emotional appeal. I think it's about making connections with people and humanising, opposition or whatever.
Dude, I absolutely agree with you. Yeah, I absolutely, and I think we're losing the ability to do that, which is concerning. Yeah, because I think that if the pro-lifers had a genuine, sat down, had a genuine conversation with some of the pro-choicers, they might actually be like, oh, maybe I'm open to changing my beliefs, and vice versa, maybe.
I'm not so sure about the other direction, but
we're on the hunt for lunch.
On the hunt for what?
Lunch.
Yeah.
Lunch? Okay, no, all good, guys. I won't hold you up. At what point do we bestow personhood upon a fetus? I feel like that's the big question.
I believe they are an entity. They are a human
from conception.
From conception.
But why?
Why? Because again, this goes to a religious point of view. Jesus.
Can you do it without appealing to religion?
But why should I not do that?
Well, because if you're trying to speak to someone who is not religious and you want to convince them that maybe their position ought to be closer to yours, appealing to religion, instantly you lose their credibility.
No, you don't.
I think you do. They don't value the word of God as much as you do.
Two adults consent to have a baby, whether they do it by mistake or whatever they've consented, right? So that all of a sudden, boom.
Okay,
there's your problem.
Devil's advocate, what about rape? Didn't consent.
That does not make any difference to the point of that child.
That it's a baby.
Because that's the awkwardness. That's the awkward. I understand that. I fully understand that.
I know that you could ask in a situation like that, why did that girl get in that situation in the first place? And I know that's controversial to say, but why did that girl get in the situation where she was vulnerable to being taken advantage of by a sexual predator?
But this is the point. Do we have to conflate issues by bringing in that? That must be a whether it's small or a large factor.
I believe it's 1% of rapes. 1% of abortions they cite rape as an.
But what about the ones who don't care?
I know.
And just have sex.
I know.
Freely?
So this is
That's a problem.
This is a good point. Yeah. So there's. I don't think we can take the extreme and then use that to kind of rationalize all of the. But it can be useful to try and figure out, okay, with the extreme, what do we believe and why, and then see whether that helps us make more sense of the other situation.
But you asked me to take my religion out of my faith.
Yes.
I can't. It's impossible.
Yeah. Pro-choice and pro-lifers often talk past each other because the pro-lifers will tend to say life begins at conception. Pro-choicers will say,
We'll have to say life begins at conception too. Medically, they have to say that.
If you can convince them.
No,
okay,
no, it's
no. Well, you can say that it comes back to the distinction between a life and perhaps personhood.
And a person, yeah, but
yes.
it's an arbitrary.
But that's what we're arguing here, right? The pro-lifes and pro-choicers are figuring out where should personhood begin legally.
And it's not a legal distinction anymore. Laws should reflect our moral distinctions. If we disassociate
Yeah, but you're debating pro-choicers to try and make them
to change their
subscribe.
moral
Yes, exactly. Okay.
God's word says we knit you together in your mother's womb in the secret place. So that's the really important part. God has created this being in its mother's womb at that first instant of conception. And there we have an individual person that is loved and cared for by God, who has set their days before them.
Yeah, and so I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that quoting the Bible can resonate with Christians, but for people who are not religious, I wonder if there is another way to express why you...
It becomes a worldview problem.
If there is a child in a burning building and you only have the chance to save them or yourself, is it immoral if you save yourself? Well, no, because you didn't set the building on fire. Abortion, you're, in a way, setting your womb on fire. You are doing the intentional killing. You are not simply neglecting,
I see what you mean.
providing care that would prevent someone dying. You are the one doing the killing.
Just briefly find common ground. I'm not supportive of irresponsible promiscuity that leads to unwanted pregnancies, and then let me think about it. 3 months in, don't feel like it. I'm absolutely against that. If I got a woman pregnant and then we didn't want the kid, even me referring to it as the kid kind of reveals my position here. I was speaking to a couple of girls who didn't want to be on camera before, who were pro-choice, and I said I would view it as immoral to not have the baby. But where it gets difficult for me is if my kid were raped, I would definitely want my kid to have access to a morning after pill, and if necessary, a medical abortion.
Have you thought about adoption?
Yes, me as a parent, I might want my kid to not have access to an abortion, not be forced to have that pregnancy. But is it also my responsibility as a parent to make sure that my daughter never ends up in a situation where she's raped in the first place?
Yeah. And have you researched about the after effects of abortion? If you're going to ask your daughter to have an abortion, have you researched about post-abortion syndrome?
It's not just...
Well, I guess
emotional risks that women have.
I understand.
You know what? And statistics prove that women who have a baby are much better off mentally than women who abort.
If a young child, these are often the hard cases that are thrown at pro-lifers.
Yeah.
And they are really hard because they are very emotive. But yes, if a young child becomes pregnant because of incest or because of rape, then they've already experienced trauma. If they then have to have an abortion, that's even more trauma.
Yeah, but then I know that
Compounded.
someone would say, well, it's 9 months worth of trauma having the kid that is a product of your...
trauma for most of the women. After the abortion, it's a lifetime.
Have you ever spoken to a woman who's been raped and then went on to have the child and chose to keep her child?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. I would look up some videos about women who chose...
I'm sure there are some, but I'm sure there are also some women who've been raped who are very happy they were able to have an abortion. But my sense is I want access to an abortion. Convince me why I shouldn't have access.
What says that a child with autism is a lesser human than us? It's that idea of, I believe that they're not, because they just are in the same sense of, they have the same sense of being able to act upon the world.
No, they don't. No, they don't. Right? Because they have. Let's say I want to maybe.
But it's also
hold on. Wait. I know. So I want to just maybe if we just pop autism to the side for the moment and take, because I want to, it gets more and more complex.
Yeah.
Let's stick with severe Down syndrome. They are not capable of interacting in the world the same way that someone who doesn't have Down syndrome does. Yes, there are different degrees. There's high functioning Down syndrome, whatnot. Let's just take a scenario where it is a severe intellectual disability. I do think that there is something. I do think that you could make a utilitarian case that it's better to have a child that is physically and intellectually capable than one who is not. And let's say that I made a choice. Let's say that me and my wife only had the resources for one child. Could I not make a moral case for I should be allowed to abort this Down syndrome fetus and have a second?
That comes right into what this is, because this is putting adult desires and adults' rights ahead of the child's right to life. So you're saying it would be inconvenient for me to have a child with a disability, and so my desires should be put ahead of the child's right to life. And I would argue that the child's right to life is primary, and the other things need to come in underneath that. So as difficult as it would be to have a child with a disability, your desires need to be underneath the child's right to life.
No matter how, is there a limit to that? No matter how physically or intellectually disabled the child is? Like, let's say spina bifida, physical disability.
I have a friend with a son with spina bifida, and he is an absolute delight in her life and has brought such joy to her and her family. And even though
I know that some people will have that experience, but I've read testimonies of parents who've had a Down syndrome child, and I read one harrowing personal experience of a parent who said she wished she hadn't had the child in the first place.
As a mother of 4 boys, once my children reached teenagers, I might have decided I didn't really want that child anymore, right? They had become hard and difficult, and they weren't bringing any joy to my life anymore. But that didn't give me a right to end their life at that point in time. And I think the same reasoning applies then to the unborn child.
A fetus with Down syndrome or a fetus with
Children are a handful regardless of how you look at them, and I think you never
some are more of a handful than others. And I'm open to being wrong. Okay, I'm open, but you can tell, right? You can tell. Let's say, for example, I plan on having 5 kids, and I want my kids to be smart, intellectually very capable, and physically very capable. If I've got 5 slots for kids that I'm going to take care of, and I find out that let's say hypothetically, again, let's say that we had, I could see the embryos and I had a selection of them, I would want to select for the embryos that are not physically or mentally disabled. And I think that you can make a case that the outcome where I have 5 kids who are mentally and physically flourishing is a better outcome than if I have 4 kids who are mentally and physically flourishing and one that has severe Down syndrome. Okay, ladies and gents, that's a wrap for today's episode. I hope our conversations have given you a greater understanding of both the pro-life and the pro-choice positions. If you're still here and you appreciate what we're trying to accomplish, you believe in actively truth-seeking and sense-making together via dialogue, then please do like the video, and if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. I appreciate all the love and support you guys have been showing me and Liam, my partner in this project, whether it's in person, just coming up and saying hey, whether it's here in the comments on YouTube or in our DMs over on Insta, as well as those of you who've supported the project financially by buying a deck of our controversial conversation cards. And if you haven't seen them before, we made them as a way of easily opening up these combos in your own life in a fun and playful way. And with that said, do remember that the show doesn't stop when the camera turns off. The mission is 24/7, and it's not just me and Liam, it's you guys as well. It's now your responsibility to go out and keep asking the important but controversial questions and then doing your best to find common ground. So stay curious, stay humble, stay open-minded, but remember that your voice matters. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next episode. Ciao.